Greetings, everyone. A very warm welcome to the webinar on driving circularity. Today, the topic is moving towards circularity, what drives real change. Really delighted to host this last webinar of the whole series. So this series is Circular Future in Action. And what we have been debating over a period of almost a year now is how do we put grassroots systems, movements, initiatives in place to drive circularity in a way that it has not been done in the past. This is the third series in the since we started our webinars, and we are really delighted to have a very good diverse group of leaders today participating. So I'd like to welcome Poonam. Poonam is an ex-colleague, so super delighted to host her to this event. So Poonam is a marketing and communications leader with over 20 years of experience. She has shaped global brands like Apple, PepsiCo, Microsoft, and Nokia, driving brand strategy, storytelling, and crisis management. As a founder of the Walnut Tree, she mentors startups, and through House of Omkar, she produces films for social change, including The Last Color and Barefoot Express. She has also been a 𝐞𝐤 𝐤𝐬𝐬 advisor. So Poonam, it's a super delight to host you. And so me and Poonam used to work together at Nokia and Microsoft. And one of the very first programs in India on take back of mobile phones was actually jointly created by us. So really delighted to have her. This was almost 2 decades back.
Yes, so wonderful to have you here and talking about the same issue.
Yeah, sure.
But I think there's so much progress that's happened. So
there's so much progress that has happened. I'd also like to welcome Mr. James Longorong. He's the environmental engineer at the Meghalaya State Pollution Control Board. Welcome, sir. He has over 12 years of experience in regulating environmental topics. He's a civil engineer from Anna University. He previously worked in the Urban Affairs Department before joining SPCB in 2012. So really looking forward to your participation, sir, and understanding how do we improve everything, I would say, while there has been a lot of dialogue, but very little action at the grassroots level on these topics. So how do we enable that change? Really looking forward to hear you. I'd like to then welcome Mr. Sumit Singh. Sumit is interesting, addition to our series. He's a designer, has a very strong background in product design and innovation and user interface. He has led global teams, created 40+ award-winning designs, holds 10 patents. He specializes in design thinking, strategy, and execution. He's currently a Chief Design and Innovation Officer at Fenesta Building Systems and is a CII National Design Committee member. He has previously worked with electronic and electrical brands like Havells, Whirlpool, LG, Xerox, and Rado. So really looking forward to hear your views, Sumit, because at the end of the day, it is unless we change the design of how we, first of all, put the products on the market, how do we create them, as well as, their sales system. It is becoming a whole challenge to manage the products. So very warm welcome to you. We'll have 2 other speakers. I'll introduce them as and when they join. One is Mr. Satish Sinha from Toxics Link, and another Dr. Prabhakar Bavade from Maharashtra Pollution Control Board. So we will introduce them when they join us. So let's start the conversation. Before I start, I'd also like to very quickly thank the sponsors for this whole series: Apple, Dell Technologies, Canon India, Cisco, and Ericsson. These are the brands who are trying to create leadership and especially thought leadership in this space by evoking a whole lot of things that have not been talked in the circular economy space. Again, circular economy, while being debated at a global level, is still not very well understood at a grassroots level. And the deep systems change that are required are really, that change is not happening. So the whole idea of this series is to start the discussion, debate those topics, initiate some small changes, which probably will lead to larger systemic change that is desirable. So thank you all who have joined in. I will also request all the participants in the webinar to please share, your questions in the chat box. We will make sure that we take your questions to the speakers in the panel. A very warm welcome again. So Poonam, I'll start, our dialogue with you. And so let us start from, where we left,
I know.
Yeah, that would be the right starting point. I mean, 2 decades back, there was this whole debate. I remember, when Nokia was starting to think this, 𝐸, why should we even do this?
Correct.
It was completely unheard. No one was talking take back, no one was talking recycling, and doing a whole marketing campaign, a very detailed marketing campaign was kind of, is this the right marketing spend even? But what we found was it was probably the best campaign that we have had.
Absolutely.
So, and then you have been at the forefront of brands like Pepsi and Apple, where sustainability has been pushed very, very strongly, both by external parties as well as internal commitments. So I'd like to really hear from you, on your experiences. How do you see this space evolving, and where do we go, from here?
Sure. So, first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. It's a pleasure connecting back with you, and talking about the same issue about 20 years back. But I think the only thing I would say, the one big shift that's happened is that the relevance of this topic has become a lot more, it's more out there. That time when we started, no one was even talking about take back. And I remember the global numbers. And again, Pranchu, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I have vaguely remember that the global numbers for take back were like 2% and 3%. We thought in India people are hoarders, but globally people are hoarders, and people keep their phones in the drawers, and people keep their wires and stuff in the drawers. And I think at that time when we started, it was early for its times. But if you recall the pilot that we had done in the 4 cities, Bangalore and Ludhiana and Bombay and Kolkata, I recall, I was trying to remember, these are the 4 cities that we started with. The highest take back we got from Punjab. And remember, and not from Bangalore. The reason being, my sense at that time was that, Mrs. Kapoor said that, oh, Mrs. Singh has sent 4 phones, I want to send 6 phones. So I think that was the starting point of our journey. But then I think incentivizing people, getting them, small freebies, getting them to the care centers, having a bin there. I think that's the journey that we, and then even getting Shah Rukh Khan and Priyanka to be the ambassadors. I think at that time it was it helped the brand a lot. The brand was seen as a very socially conscious brand. Today, when I think about the same issue, and I was, thinking about the session today, I think the biggest challenge as a consumer I see is bringing the issue, is this issue bringing the relevance of the issue in an average consumer. I think that's important. That's one. The second thing I would say is, and I'm not talking about the corporate practices of reduce and, pick up products that are more sustainable, etc. I'm talking about an average consumer. That is one. The second, where do I drop my phone? Where do I give my stuff? I think building that conversation, I think is very important. I think bringing out the whole issue that this is an issue is very important. I think at that time, what we did was a good starting point. It carried on for some time. I know brands this time, because of the regulations, it's a part of their mandate to do it. But I think bringing the conversation more out in the open is very important. I think I would just leave it at that.
Sure. And so are you starting to see change in people's attitude?
100%,
because that is something
100%.
that's just, when we, if I were to look at 2 decades back, there was like, acha, aisa bhi hota hai. It was like, it was always with a doubt. Kyun karna hai? And correct. To now ki, acha, aap nahi kar rahe. Matlab, I am starting to see that. But still, we see a lot of lip service. Rather than real action. So, even at without naming any organization, what we are seeing is, a lot of people are talking, but the deep intent to really make that change is missing. So
that's right. And I think to some extent, I would say, in India, हम लोग अपने आप को सब कहते हैं कि we are hoarders, and, जब तक वो टी-शर्ट का पोंचा से डस्टर सब कुछ ना बने हम छोड़ेंगे नहीं. But globally, that's the challenge. I don't know of any country that's doing. Maybe a few countries here and there have some great exciting pilots happening. Like I read something happening in Australia, but otherwise, I think the conversation has definitely, there's more conversation happening, but I think bringing it out more and getting people to start thinking and saying that this is important to do. Like हम लोग अभी dry waste, wet waste करने लग गए हैं, right? तो वो इसलिए करने भी लग गए हैं क्योंकि that's become mandatory to some extent in some societies, right? But I think bringing this from a regulatory perspective, also from a consumer behavior perspective, this is a behavior shift we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because we do hand-me-downs, we do a lot of that. But then how do you build that thing in the, and especially, I think the big thing for us should be to focus on Gen Z and millennials, because they're the ones who are more open to sustainable practices. They buy brands that are more sustainable. They are more willing to pay extra for brands that are sustainable. So from a brand perspective as well, and from a consumer perspective as well, I think those are the audiences that we should look at as champions of this.
Yeah. Thank you, Poonam, for your initial remarks. I now like to welcome Dr. Prabhakar Vavde. Dr. Prabhakar Vavde is a field officer at the Maharashtra Pollution Control Board with over 15 years of experience in environmental regulation and research. He specializes in the enforcement of environmental laws, focusing on e-waste, solid waste, and battery waste. He holds a PhD in groundwater quality assessment and has published extensively on this topic. Very, very warm welcome, sir. I've had pleasure of interacting with you a few times in the past.
So yeah,
really
thank you.
To this dialogue.
Thank you, everyone.
So I'll actually go to you, Dr. Vavde, from what Poonam has shared. So see, one of the big things is how do we enforce? So India has done some very, very good work in developing regulations in this space. Now, no regulation is perfect. We have our own challenges, and we will learn as we implement these regulations. There's a lot of evolution. But the good news is we have taken a lot of steps in this direction. So, sir, one of the big challenges which is emerging today is in the space of enforcement. That and space, it is not just the way I think of enforcement is how do we create deterrence in the system instead of you can't go and enforce with 10,000 plus producers, maybe 700 or 800 recyclers. It has become a challenge in its own sense. So sir, how do you look at using creative ways and means so that circular economy really happens in intent rather than just in dialogues?
Yeah, we all know that the biggest challenge in the waste management or improving the waste management perspectives is the degree of awareness. Awareness needs to be increased among all stakeholders, not only the generators, common people, but to the recyclers, informal sectors, NGOs, government authorities. Everyone, awareness level shall be increased. This is the first step to have a proper waste management system and to achieve the goals of circular economy. Now, as a regulatory body, MPCB has a vital role in promoting circular economy or waste management by ensuring that resources are efficiently utilized, waste minimization, or materials are reintegrated back into the economy.
Yeah.
So there are 7 to 8 waste management laws like e-waste, plastic waste, hazardous waste, C&D waste, biomedical waste that we enforce, and at various level it has to be enforced, not only at the level of generators but collection centers, segregation, then recycling, transportation. There are various steps. So it is not possible for us to monitor each and every level.
Yeah.
So it is mandatory or it is necessary to have a increased level of awareness among all these stages, since the generation till the recyclers. And another challenge is that the big role is played by informal sector, and those players who are in informal sector, they are not willing to join formal sector because they are they are enjoying the benefits of informal sector. They don't want to come into the rules and regulations, tax, GST, and all that. This is another big challenge which is faced by the waste management sector. Another issues like technology, means availability of suitable technology, cheap technology, or easily accessible technology. That is also another big challenge. So all these issues shall be addressed comprehensively to have a better perspective in this matter.
So, thank you, sir, for your initial remarks. I'd like to bring in Mr. Sumit now. Sumit, one of the big challenges, whenever we talk of circular economy is, is at the design stage. Products are just not designed well enough for circularity to happen. And when I talk of design, we can talk more from what kind of materials have gone into creation of the product, how recyclable the product is it easy to disassemble? One of the biggest nightmares, for example, that we today find is that there are so many embedded materials in the same component that segregation and extraction of those materials becomes a nightmare. Highly pronounced in complex electronics. But more and more materials are moving towards that mix of materials instead of monomers. So how do you, look at this as a problem, and what is your view on solving this?
Well, thank you so much, and I'm happy to be on this panel with such accomplished people, and it's a pleasure being here. As a designer, first and foremost, from the point of our creative execution, we come from the aspect of empathy, right? And when you have empathy, you try and build empathy through your process and through the ecosystem. So now, if you look at the customers who you are designing for, or if you're looking at the business that you're catering to, you kind of design accordingly or try and create the solution accordingly. Now, when it comes to your pertaining question on material complexity, well, these are the big implementation barriers that we see because designers, so the tools that you have, you work with the tools that you have or the materials that are there. While in implementation, there are several roadblocks, right? Or several critical aspects which need to be solved as we go forward, right? One is, design is not just about designing a product, it's also designing the business model, right? If the business model or the ecosystem is designed for circularity, right, the designer's role becomes very easy, right? There are supply chain complications. There are complications of this material composites and complex materials that you mentioned. And there are also cost pressures and supply chain limitations. And so, to just break down this problem, there are several of them, right? And designer is one of the cog in the wheel of all of this. But as a whole, it is a systems design or an ecosystem design, business model design kind of framework, which needs to be addressed to cater to the material complexity positioning.
So, Mr. Singh, are you starting to see this dialogue enter the design fraternity? Are people now starting to think, or or is it, if I were to talk, let's say about 2 decades or 3 decades back, I mean, it was still okay. It is someone is saying it, but it was not a core issue. Is it starting to hold a central place in the design aspect, whether it is from a business at an overall level, the ecosystem that business needs to thrive in, or a product in itself? So, are you seeing that change happening in the ecosystem?
See, as I mentioned, the design has always been very sensitive towards ecology, right? As designers, we have always been, right? And empathy, as I mentioned, is the core from where things start, and it has always been very focused, and especially from the place where I studied, NID, the foundations were very strong from that. From inclusivity, from designing, from basic materials, from trying to really close the gap between the solution and the need in the most effective manner, or in the most resource efficient manner. However, as we go forward, we have to make money, right? Everybody needs to make money. There are large industrial giants. There is this whole industry which creates the dynamics of economy. And which is where we also need to understand that, there needs to be, like, Mr. Vavde mentioned, that it also has to be incentivized, subsidized, even if we, and the mindset of the customer to also, kind of take in those products which have which are necessarily cradle to grave kind of design, and don't have the just take, make, and waste. So if you have that kind of approach, there is a different product that you design. And if you have an approach which is more of a circularity approach or a regenerative approach, the product thereby is of a different nature.
Yeah. Thank you, Sumit. Let me bring in James, Mr. Lamrong in the dialogue. Yeah, sir, if you could share your, your experiences on how in the state of Meghalaya, you are driving behavioral change at a community level. It would be very, very helpful. From what I recall, in my earlier debates and discussions at a state level, there was so much active community participation towards this initiative. However, at a, while the community is looking forward to it, State Pollution Control Board is looking to it, because of the change in rules where geographical scope has been excluded, the participation has gone down over the years. So how do you enable more and more participation from brands, from different stakeholders at a state level, considering that the rules today do not emphasize on geographical collection systems?
Yes, first of all, I am very grateful. Thank you, Mr. Pranshu, for having me. And it was my pleasure to have the co-panelist with me with a wide range of expertise in the field of, I can say, both in the field of marketing and e-waste and production. And yes, secondly, Ms. Kriti, who has been following up this webinar very closely. At first, I think I was very much associated with Sambhav back then when the e-waste rules to 2016 was framed. So they were very active. I remember we were attending the programs back then in Delhi also. And yes, Sambhav that time was very, very active. And well, just to share the background of what we have done and what we have achieved in this past, almost from the initial waste management rules of e-waste 2011 till now, almost 14 years, this rule has been there, and there has been a lot of amendment and just has been done, and the mandate has been very clearly specified. Well, yes, as pointed out by Mr. Pranshu, that was, I don't know, that was not, I won't be agree with you. Well, we have achieved tremendous success, especially in collection of e-waste. As per the data that was available with us, if you see the records during the year, in this last 3 years, we have done massive collections. So the collections in the year 22-23, we have collected almost 7 tons of the e-waste from a small state of like Meghalaya. But that too, we have the generation is mostly in Shillong. And 23-24, we the collected e-waste was around 45 metric ton again. So I think there was a massive improvement in terms of the collection drive, and we make sure the bulk consumers, the individuals at individual levels, that they give back the e-waste to the authorized collection centers or to the authorized recyclers. So I don't know, but I felt yeah, because somehow during last years they have done very well, but in these last 2-3 years the collection has been reduced. So I mean, yeah, I appreciate the way they have taken the awareness drive at community level and at school level, but I think the collection also need to be like the maybe the attention also need to be focused more on the collection aspect also, so that maybe since I want to share the figure, as per the inventory report we have done in the last 4 years. So we found Meghalaya to have to generate around 780 metric ton of e-waste per year. So that a lot of gap we have. So if you see the figure which I just shared just now, so we could see that we have collected only 10% of the e-waste.
Yeah.
So we still have a lot of gap to improve. So yes, with we can reach out to the citizens and to the bulk consumers to in the management of the e-waste system.
Sure. Thank you, sir. I'll also now like to invite Mr. Satish Sinha to the panel. Satish Sinha is a very well-known figure in this space. He is Associate Director of Toxics Link and has led policy advocacy and grassroots initiatives since very long, since 2003. So he's a very deep expert in waste management, food safety, chemicals, and has really shaped a whole range of policies in India. Very welcome, Satish ji. So so just to build upon the dialogue that we are having, regulations have dramatically changed. The first version of the e-waste rules versus today's rules, they have gone through a very significant shift. Some people are liking it, some people hate it, some people love it. What is your take on it? And are you finding that it is becoming more efficient in its approach? Is it giving the desired results? Especially, from a circularity point of view, which means, introduction of recycled content into new products. At least in plastics, we are seeing that is going to happen very soon. But on the e-waste side, what is your view, sir?
Thank you, Pranshu, and lovely to see you after a very long time and interact with all the panelists. So, yeah, it's been a long time they've been associated with this issue of electronic waste, the regulations, the changes in regulation, and I have not actually kept pace with the kind of measurements that are going to happen on electronic waste. But I would like to say that, I completely agree with you, that some people are loving the regulations, and I think that comes from a specific stakeholder, kind of people who are loving it, and kind of people who are not very comfortable working with this kind of a framework for multiple reasons. And I know that there is a portal now which has come up, but I think the more important point is that how do you see circular economy, and how do you identify circular economy, and how do you see transitioning to circular economy? I think these are very important factors that we need to be very sure as to what are the indicators for circular economy.
Yeah.
Do you have the right indicators for circular economy? And which are those indicators? Are you looking at, so circular economy can be on many aspects. You can look at resource efficiency, you can look at waste minimization, you can look at repairs, you can look at from the point of view of energy, you can look at from the point of view of water, you can look at a point of view of multiple indicators that you can have for looking at this thing. And I think I just heard Sumit talking about design. By itself, design is complex, and when I talk about design in India, most manufacturers or most stakeholders tend to say, well, the products are not designed in India, so let's not talk about design in India. So that's the resistance that you meet when you talk about design. I think we need to overcome some of these initial resistances that we have, because a lot of products may not be designed in India, but they're being manufactured in India, and they're also being end-of-life reprocessing happens in India. So do you send your products, when you design a product, when you put a product in market, do you send it for recycling? Do you understand the recycler's point of view? How easy is it to recycle, or how difficult is it to recycle? Do you feed that into your design concept or not? How do you design a product, essentially? And these are the changes, Pranshu, that is happening across the globe.
Yeah.
If you look at,
very true.
am I Am I audible? Am I making this thing? So if you look at these kind of things, that how do you design a product for recyclability, reusability, detoxification, dematerialization, multiple parameters on which you can design a product. So all these parameters are there. So how do you design a product, and at what points do you get inputs from different places so that you design a product better? And I think these are some things that we need to start bringing in. Like, if I just give you an example for a change, when you had this ROHS regulation, so by a regulatory framework, you detoxified the material. So there could be multiple points where you can think of detoxifying material or making material. You can find materials which are better, perhaps more durable, more long lasting. So I think these are, again, by virtue of regulations, by virtue of incentives, by virtue of interacting with industry. So multiple ways that you can do this. But your question was that, do you see from circular economy point of view that this is happening or not? I would say that, what are the indicators for circular economy? Do you have how much of secondary raw materials you have generated out of electronic waste? Do you have the data? Do you measure the data? It's not about just doing plastic recycling and a content of 5% of recycled plastic being used into the virgin material stock. I think we are looking at the lowest fruit, perhaps the fruit which has fallen on the ground and rotten. And that is where we are starting from. I think we should look at gold, silver, palladium, and the most expensive metals and the most rare metals, for which this whole concept of circular economy actually stands in good stead. If you look at some of the most difficult matters, or some of the most difficult minerals and metals which are critical and strategic in nature, I think our focus should be there. And we should try and see that from this portal or from anywhere else, how do we quantify that from X amount of waste, we have been able to recover A, B, C, D metals and minerals to the quantity of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need to have clear measurements and quantifiable measurements for circular economy understanding, and to see that, yes, that much material is being less used.
Sure.
I'll talk about, let's see, waste minimization. Do you have a criteria for waste minimization in this portal? Do you define how waste minimization is to be understood and seen from how much are you putting in the market? How much of waste is being generated? Did we minimize this waste? If you're looking at if you're looking at repair and extending the life of the product, how are you doing it? What are the kind of parameters do you have? Do you have an index for upgradation? Do you have an index for its recyclability? How do you define that? So I think these are very clear concepts and directions on which, if you want to transition towards circular economy, you have to bring all this into conversation, and then start talking to the industry and start encouraging the industry to take this on board. So that's much more for my initial comments, Pranshu. Thank you so much.
Sure, Satish. So both to Sumit and Poonam, Poonam, you have been part of boardrooms in many spaces. So how are you seeing this conversation shifting, and is it really becoming central? And if not, then what is it that needs to be done to make it central? Is regulation the only way to make it happen? Because whenever I have been debating it at all levels, what I find is people always say consumers are not asking for it, so why should we? And at the end of the day, it always boils down to who is going to pay for it. And is it, and my question has been, is it really a cost? Have you even assessed that? In many cases, what we have found is it is so small a cost, but just the perception is it's a huge cost on the table. So how do you see this shifting? And if it is not shifting, what should we do about it?
That's a tough one. I think I don't think, I think has it taken center stage? I don't think so. It's not center stage unless the organization is in that is in the space of driving a social change. I don't see many organizations. I think I see a lot of organizations doing this because it's mandatory in some cases. It's a part of the regulation. very few organizations do you really see that are socially conscious and are trying to drive it from the, like inside out. I don't see that happening a lot, honestly. I mean, I know India's done a great job of, building a regulatory framework around it. I think, but I don't see that. It's somehow not priority. It's somehow not priority. It's like, when we were when I was in Pepsi also, while that was not about e-waste, the fact that, the whole conversation around junk food, it almost became like polarized, because there is this bunch of people who are about reducing, health, making it more healthy, making the products more healthy, reducing salt, reducing sugar, etc. But it almost became like, again, to the point, is the consumer asking for it? And I think that's something that will change, because the consumer is beginning to ask for it. The generation that we are living in today, if we are able to build that awareness in this current generation of millennials and Gen Z, if we are able to build that's something that might start happening. Like, people are today buying more, for example, sustainable brands. Right? They're willing to pay, I think there's data that they're willing to pay 70% extra. 70% of the millennials are willing to pay extra for a brand that is sustainable, for a brand that's socially conscious brand, right? So at one level, if there is, I think we need to trigger this at one level. But again, and I think that'll also happen at the organization level once this trigger happens. Because at the moment, it's like I'm doing it either as mandatory to do it, or it's not it's not inherently built into the system. That's the question.
So one of the counter narratives that I keep on, actually we are also now reaching that point, that will it be too late till the time this public narrative is built, that consumer demand is really awakened and they are pushing everyone for a better product or a better design, considering, all the indicators of, if I were to look at all living indicators or planet indicators, the way they are starting to decline, the worry is now that will it be too late? Do we even need to wait for that consumer demand to happen? Or, and that's where regulators have taken a very different stand, that, we can't let it, let market, manage itself. We have to come in now. And the time is now becomes a very central point, that there is no more time to lose now. So, Sumit, James, Dr. Vavde, any suggestions, any points of view on these things? So how do we really, hasten the whole decision making? How do we make it?
How do you push the pedal really hard?
Yeah, how do you really make it happen? Because, every single indicator shows such crazy decline, at a planetary level. How do we really make it happen, at a pace which makes sense to all of us?
I'll just, start off with what Poonam mentioned. It's not a boardroom discussion at all, right? The places that I have been in, especially large, appliances or electronic companies, unless, it is marketable. For example, if, Fairphone comes up with a brand which is just, about, which is their story, right? If it is their story, they will sell accordingly. If it's not part of their story, or if it's not monetizable, it's not 100%, really working out.
Precisely.
Secondly, if you look at Adidas, they got into making a shoe, which is completely out of plastic waste and but then affordance of that shoe, or even durability, or, unless you use the rubbers and the glues and all of that, the performance doesn't come. So there is also this deficit in the entirety of making a completely performing simple product, also with the current materials and technologies that we have, right? So there is this limitation as well. Now, pushing it to, being able to, I think we'll have to completely alter the fabric of how consumers, what is in the consumer realm, right? and what are they used to? If you look at this latest thing about the straw, which Trump is now, again given back, right? Undone or whatever. See, it works but that straw did not work, right? We've used those straws, and after a point, those straws don't work really. But it's not about giving it up. We have to make a better straw out of, recyclable material rather than go back in time and say, okay, get me back the same old straws. Right.
Yeah.
So I think, this is a very important topic. Everybody should be alive to it. I am sure the Gen Alpha and the Gen Zs are completely alive to it. My children are, they will. But then there is an affordance issue. There is an availability issue. There is a durability issue. And there's a big policy issue also with the. Rather than looking at them as issues, maybe we should turn and flip it as opportunity. We must incentivize the people who are making these materials, right? We should really subsidize those materials, plow in a lot of dough or money, to make those facilities be equipped and infrastructure-wise to do a lot of those researches, right? And thereby funnel it into the real world where manufacturing happens. Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will always have this kind of a barrier where we will have these excuses to say, right?
Yeah. So just to build on what you're saying, we have been having a lot of dialogue with global brands on use of recycled content. And there are a lot of challenges, which exist. I mean, there are no reliable supply chains. Forecasting cannot happen. Again, because of at the recycler's end, because waste is waste, it is not predictable. So they don't know what technical qualities will they be able to produce at the end. So, there is a wide variation in the technical outputs of the material. So, the challenges are so wide and large that until the whole ecosystem is able to accept that, okay, I don't need A grade quality, I'm okay with the A minus quality because it still functions. So functionality over appearance, functionality over some other things will have to be rethought. And that is where I am finding, the more I debate with large brands, the more I find that even if the willingness is there, the ecosystem is just absent to make it happen. So, sometimes it is not even that, is it desirable? It is, even if it is desirable, so what? What do I do? How do I make it happen? So even that is now appearing as a big constraint.
I would seem to feel that, the government bodies and the industries have to work very closely, right, to make it a mission. We need both to make it a mission to, get these things moving in the right way. It won't happen in isolation without, industry doing it on its own. The government and the industry have to participate and create these goals.
Yeah. Dr. Maude, if you are still there. I think he has stepped out. Satishji, any suggestions from your point on this side? How do we, because this use of circular content, which is today being debated, and yes, one is what kind of materials are we talking? Are we looking at materials with high ecological footprint, like gold, for example? Gold has one of the highest footprint. So any amount of a gram of recycled gold is equivalent to a ton of, other products getting recycled. So, use of what materials are we talking of from a reutilization point of view, as you said, is super critical today. Are we really focusing on the right materials? But how do we start building this narrative, and how do we get the ecosystem ready? My struggle has been a lot on ecosystem readiness for something like this.
I'm aware of it, Pranshu. But I think many of these materials that you were talking about, or if you talk about electronics, or you can talk about textile, you can talk about anything. Most of these are globally, aligned, and they are in the global supply chain process. There's nothing which is absolutely unique to one country or other countries. So I think the changes would have to be made globally. That's my first point that I make. It's very hard to make it nationally or regionally. It will have to be worked upon globally. And that is why some of these policy discourses that you have at the global platform make some sense to me. Not all of it, but some sense it does make to me. And I come back again to some of these global policy frameworks that you're talking about today. And I give you an example from textile industry. I think industry, governments, multilateral bodies, they will all have to come together at some platform to see that there is some direction to finding solutions to some of these problems. In the textile world, also the same thing happens. The consumer demands, and consumer has been demanding fast fashion, and the world is loaded with textile waste today. In fact, the world does not know how to deal with textile waste. And I'm carrying out a research and understanding the level of problems that the world is having. And for your information, some of you who are in the panel, most of the textile waste is flowing back to India from across the world. And I'm just giving you a broader picture. And that was the situation for electronic waste way back when I started working on electronic waste. In fact, at one point of time, if any of you recall, all the CRTs of the world were in India, cathode ray tubes, because there was no technology to deal with cathode ray tubes anywhere in the world. And you had the what was that? Liquid crystal display that had LCD and then LED display that to come, and this was an outdated technology. So everybody dumped that technology into India. But you know, that's how it works, how the ecosystem works. This is the ecosystem in which we have been functioning till now. But we will have to come together to understand this, and everyone will have to work in this direction. And I'll just give you an example from the textile industry. Now, there has been a pressure on the textile industry to make upstream changes, to reduce chemicals, some of these banned chemicals in products. And there are major brands who are sourcing material from India, who are sourcing garments from India. They seek another set of garments from India. So India manufactures two sets of garments, one for the global market and one for the domestic market. Now, that's the paradox of how it can be done. But luckily or fortunately, these substitutes are available and they can be easily substituted. As you said, for electronics, it becomes a little more difficult to completely close the loop. If you say closed loop recycling, closed loop supply chain process, it is a little difficult at this point of time. But I don't see this difficulty existing if there is enough money put into R&D for metal refining, and getting the right kind of standards and specification for recycled materials to be available. I think it can be achieved. It is achievable. And I'll give you an example. I had the same kind of discussion about 20 years back when we talked about, can you remove the lead from solder? The whole industry turned around and said, it is impossible to get the same strength, to get the thing that at the temperature condition that we want in the electronics industry. People put money, they went inside it, people had research, and they came up with the material which is now working very well. So it is a similar kind of situation that we are in today. I think there is always a resistance, and we'll have to push it a little bit, give it a nudge, give it encouragement, both, and then see that some of these challenges that we are talking about material specification and usefulness of the recycled material, it can be done. And I think research, R&D money, some breakthrough into this, and getting economically viable, affordable kind of technology.
Sure. Pune, I'll come back to you. So from being a corporate leader to being a filmmaker now, especially on social change. So how do you believe that these mediums, can we use these mediums to really drive this change at a people level? Netflix has this fantastic movie called Buy More, which was released a few months back. Really fantastically dealt on sustainable consumption and how waste is challenging So your experiences, in this new avatar, how do you see these mediums, and how do we really rethink even, not just making consumer aware, but really inspiring them so that they become pushy in their agendas?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't done honestly anything on waste. Most of the films that I have worked on are related to women, and it's about their building hope for women. And now I won't say that this is like the films that I've done, whether it's a documentary or a feature film, they're really about inspiring stories around how they're able to change the mindset. And so it's more in that zone. But I totally agree with you because the visual impact of visual medium is just amazing. And if you're able to tell that story visually, if you're able to, and I go back to I think, when you look at this entire space, there is the government, there is the industry bodies, there are the associations, there are the producers, there are the consumers, right? All these have to work in tandem. There is no question. Now, I think the question at this point is how fast can we move, and how do we make it into at the moment, it's a very orange topic. How do you make it into a red topic, for everybody, right? And for it to take that space, take that steam. And I think and it's also at some level, you're talking about behavior change, right? You're talking about shifting behavior towards this space, making it priority, making it relevant. So visually, I think that visual medium really helps tell you, drive more impact for sure, rather than, even on Instagram, a static post and a reel, right? A reel has much more impact, right? So as simple as that. Even if you are able to drive that and you are getting to see people do it, and I think incentivizing people who are doing even that small change, how do you get them to be out there and seen as heroes, seen as champions, right? Whether it's a producer, whether it's an organization that's doing it. See, the organization will like to do it because they are going to tom that we are such a great brand. Which is fair as well. But I think getting what's happening in Meghalaya, how do you make it more mainstream? How do you make this into, how do you make them as champions of what they're trying to do, right? Getting more consumers who are actually taking that step. I think multiple things need to be done at multiple levels, but definitely doing it visually will drive more impact in a faster way. Because India, the way India is consuming video is like 5 to 6 hours per day.
Yeah.
It's crazy. 5 to 6 hours per day. But one work day is committed to video. So I have the security guard also watching films at night. So watching content at night. So, how do you intersperse that and get in there,
Sure. Sumit, so we are now approaching almost our time window for closure of the. So any last remarks that you wish to have? Any thoughts?
Yeah. I think, this has been a great conversation, diverse views, and, I'm also educated now. One of the things that, we should also now embrace is digitization, and digital technology. I do not know how the numbers work, but when iTunes came, it completely wiped out the cassette players and the CDs and all of that, right? And now we do not have those existing in the current world. Now, there are these things that we can, let's say the conventional product journeys, or the, how human evolution happens in terms of consuming music or consuming anything else works. But I'm sure that, all these technologies that are coming up will also enable some of these really tangible things to go away. Which cause which destroys our ecosystem or ecology or nature, things like that. So I'm sure at our level we do not know much, but these are also things that they are also working at the core of addressing these concerns, and we should also have that well embraced in the whole logic of circularity.
Thank you, Sumit. Satish ji, any last remarks from you? You have done so much work on the behavioral change aspect. So any things that you wish to bring up from that point of view?
Behavior change is the most difficult part.
Huge, massive.
It's the most complex thing. It's very easy to say that how do you bring behavior change? And if I just give you an example of behavior change, can put things in perspective. Look at Delhi Metro. How do the population change their behavior? They go 20 feet down into the ground and their behavior changes. When they go to New Delhi railway station, they'll behave differently. The moment they go down, they start behaving differently. Why does it happen? Which switch is switched on by people? It's so hard to understand this behavior change. So that's what I say. Awareness is just about one thing. All of us that I see, middle class and educated people, are aware about plastics. There's no dearth of awareness, but we will still use plastic. in our homes, to our children, in our shopping, everything. We don't even stand up. These days, I see some things happening to say, nahi chahiye mujhe, plastic bag mat do mujhe. Aapne kyun rakha hai? I see going to restaurants and hotels and conventions, they'll give you a plastic bottle and we feel so comfortable opening that bottle and drink. It is a matter of pride. If I didn't get a bottle, I will feel a little this thing. Oh my God, you didn't have this thing to even give me a bottle of drinking water. This is the mindset that we come from. So behavior change is a very, very complex thing. And I think this is where we come from, that all of us need to start seeing, because awareness will not necessarily result in behavior change. Awareness with certain amount of drive, with certain amount of other forces will need required to create behavior change. Otherwise, it's not going to happen so easily. If you think that if you're going to go out on some medium and tell people that, this is not good for environment, and this is, if it makes economic sense, it makes behavior change.
Incentivizing.
Incentivizing,
I think, definitely.
Yeah, I don't have to tell people to use a LED light.
Yeah.
Okay, from CFL to transitioning to LED light, I don't have to tell people. People understand that very well. I don't have to tell people that why use a 5-star refrigerator or an air conditioner. It makes economic sense to them. So behavior change happens here very easily. What makes a little impact on your pocket or on your sensibilities, so it makes very easy to have behavioral change. So these are all many things that you can do to behavioral change. So again, in the question of waste also, I think the mindsets of the manufacturers have to change a lot. Apart from, consumer and all that, consumer is a little distant away, though he's very closely, he is the person who is driving the industry because he's consuming products at a very fast pace. But I think the manufacturers have to understand that there is an economic benefit in making products better for him also and for the society at large. He needs to understand this because nobody has been able to monetize this and give that in hand of many of these people. I recall, and you recall, Pranshu, that when with Nokia, what was the size of this equipment? How big was this mobile phone? This big. Yeah. Today, we have a mobile phone which is this big, packed, less of material, much more smarter, much more better. So how has this change happened? It is innovation, it is technology, it is about everything. But I think this point also makes sense, that how do manufacturers start to see demanufacturing and manufacturing together as one activity. So it's not about only demanufacturing, it's about many steps in between, which I have missed out in this thing. But yes, behavior change will happen. It will take much more effort. But one example that I gave you, that if it makes a little bit of incentivizes some of these things, I get it much easier, much better. So governments can do a lot in incentivizing. And I gave you an example of LED light. Government made it 90 rupees for the weaker section. And everybody started using LED lights, and then became a habit. He didn't mind paying 200 rupees for an LED light. And he didn't buy a tube light for it, but he went for an LED light. So, these are long-term changes which happens. And many people, many of us in today's day have got used to using a paper bag. We are using from malls and other things. We started to, and we generally look at the shopkeeper when he gives me a plastic bag. He said, "Aapke paas dusra wala nahi hai kya? Abhi to pura market change ho gaya hai." So you do question at times. So I think these are all things that we need to start putting in place. Regulatory mechanism certainly needs to be done. I think a little bit of enforcement for a country like India has to be in place. If you don't have a regulatory enforcement mechanism, you can say goodbye to all the regulations that you make.
Absolutely.
It'll be on a piece of paper. And you'll be happy that Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Health or Ministry of Commerce has given a regulation. It can just be there. And last point I want to say, Pranshu, for everyone, is about, when we talk, what is a regulatory mechanism, is about all these institutions that we have built in the last so many years. Today, if you look at the status of these institutions, they have no regulatory strength. They have inadequate capacity, inadequate manpower, inadequate technical skills, and inadequate everything. When you make a regulation and its implementation is weak, because you don't factor in the cost of implementation. There's a cost to implement.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be factored in by governments and by everybody. If you think that it can be implemented free of cost, your laws can be implemented free. If you have a policing, you need to invest money in policing if you want to have law and order. Similarly, if you need to do environmental governance, you need to invest money into environmental governance and into regulatory mechanism. You can't just have it without that. So I think these are very important inputs for any of us to understand. So if you want to transition to circular economy, you will do step by step. You will need to invest money in all these aspects of it so that you are able to transition gradually and slowly. Thank you.
Thank you, Satish. Actually, you have summed up the whole session very well, got all of the points. So you have eased my work. So I'd like to, really say thank you to all of you. Sumit, thank you for your time. Poonam, a delight to host you, have conversations with you. And Satish, really, thanks for continuing this conversation and supporting in this dialogue. I'll again also like to thank our sponsors, Apple, Dell, Canon, Cisco, and Ericsson for making these events happen. Unfortunately, Dr. Vavde had to leave somewhere in between, just at the end of our dialogue. But thanks to him and Mr. Lamurong. And to all the people out there, thank you for listening to this dialogue and sharing your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranshu.
Have a very good evening.
Having...
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Interesting.